Good day, folks. Welcome to today's podcast, a podcast I've been wanting to make for a while. Rosa Luxemburg and Why She Matters. While Rosa Luxemburg isn't as famous as she ought to be, I first encountered Rosa Luxemburg in 2013 where I read Robert Service's excellent Comrades, A World History of Communism, and she appears in the early chapters. And as you'll learn from today's podcast, her contribution to the Marxist canon and socialist revolution was immense. So Rosa Luxemburg was born in Zamość, Poland in 1871, then a part of the Russian Empire, to a secular Jewish family. And she showed early intellectual promise despite a hip ailment that left her with a limp. So she joined the socialist movement as a teenager and fled Poland in 1889 to avoid arrest and studied at the University of Zurich, earning a doctorate in economics in 1897 with a thesis on Poland's industrial development. Well, she co-founded the Social Democratic Party of the Kingdom of Poland and opposed Polish nationalism in favour of international proletarian solidarity. So here's a key difference. Many of the previous people I've mentioned were nationalists, and indeed pretty much from I won't say even before the mid 20th century, most Marxists and most socialists were nationalists, but the earlier socialists were more internationalists, and she was certainly an internationalist. As it says in the Communist Manifesto, the working man has no country. So, settling in Berlin in 1898, through a marriage of convenience for German citizenship, she became a prominent voice in the Social Democratic Party of Germany, the SPD, Social Democratic Party of Deutschland. Kind of a misleading acronym, SPD, but the D in this case stands for Deutschland. So she was a critic of revisionism and she advocated mass strikes after experiencing the 1905 Russian Revolution firsthand. Now, just a quick reminder, the 1905 Russian Revolution led to a temporary government where we see the first historical appearance of the word Soviet, meaning a council. As we know, the 1905 Russian Revolution was a failure, but it it was in some ways a dress rehearsal for the 1917 Russian Revolution, the ultimately successful one. So Rosa Luxemburg was a critic of both reformism and Bolshevism's authoritarianism, and she championed revolutionary mass action, democracy, and anti-imperialism in works such as The Accumulation of Capital and the Junius pamphlet of 1915, which she opposed the First World War as a betrayal of socialism. So she taught at the SPD party school and warned against dictatorship, stressing freedoms of the press and assembly, even in a posthumously published critique of the Russian Revolution. Well, a good point. I mean, how did Germany go in the 1930s? Let's not go there. So she was imprisoned from 1916 to 1918 for anti-war agitation, but she co-founded the Spartacus League, which later became the Communist Party of Germany, with Karl Liebknecht, and during the 1918 to 1919 German Revolution. Unfortunately, she was captured after the failed Spartacist uprising in January 1919. She was murdered by the Freikorps paramilitaries in Berlin in 1919, with a body rather unceremoniously dumped in a canal. So, not a happy ending, but her legacy lives on. And why does her legacy live on? Well, her main work, the Accumulation of Capital, it tries to solve an essential question in Marxism. How can capitalism keep expanding when workers cannot buy back all the goods they produce, and capitalists themselves cannot absorb all the surplus through their own consumption? This was written before the days of private jets and whatnot, but the main point is that it takes us to expanded reproduction. So she starts from Marx's idea of expanded reproduction, which is in a growing capitalist economy, part of the surplus value is reinvested rather than consumed. So production grows over time. And this takes us to the key question. Who buys the extra generated by this reinvestment? Given that workers are underpaid relative to what they produce and capitalists cannot or do not want to consume it all as luxury goods. So, takes us to the essential thing, imperialism. So the best known work on this is Lenin's Imperialism is the highest form of capitalism, but Luxemburg's work is worthy of study. And her central thesis is that capitalism cannot realise its surplus value purely within a closed, fully capitalist system. The solution, expansion. So to keep accumulating, capital must continually find buyers in non-capitalist environments, such as peasants, colonies, pre-capitalist societies, or state sectors that are not yet fully commodified. So, yeah, we see it all. It's still going on right now. Iraq war, anyone? Libya, Syria? Oh, I shouldn't go on. So, from this, Luxemburg explains imperialism not just a political choice but a structural necessity. So, people may ask, well, why do we keep voting and getting the uni party? Why do we keep voting and keep getting the party of forever war? I mean, it seemed to reach kind of an apex of sorts in the early 2000s with George Bush, but then there was that guy after George, that other guy who talked differently to George Bush and said things differently to George Bush, but did the same things as George Bush. Oh, what was he called? Barack Obama, that's him. Funny the things you forget, eh? Well, anyway, back to the podcast. Well, capitalist states and firms are driven to penetrate and destroy non-capitalist natural economies, i.e. communal lands, peasant subsistence, indigenous social forms, to turn them into markets for surplus goods, sources of raw material and reservoirs of labour. Now, I remember at one point when I was back in my days as a bachelor's degree student, looking at the Vietnam War, and my lecturer at the time told me, well, look at the Marxist critiques, because the Marxist critiques will say that war is really about expansion of markets. So, yeah, it's I should have looked at Rosa Luxemburg back then. So this also brings us to ongoing primitive accumulation and, in turn, violence. So she argued that what Marx called primitive accumulation, such as enclosures, conquest, dispossession, is not just an origin story of capitalism, but an ongoing process. And yes, again, we see it going on now. So capital accumulation always involves violent expropriation, legal coercion, and state intervention to dismantle non-capitalist social relations and impose market relations. So this takes us to the ultimate limit and the inner contradiction. So the historical limit of capitalism lies in the exhaustion of non-capitalist strata and territories that can be drawn into the system. But she also suggests that this exhaustion can never be fully completed in a neat mechanical way. Instead, the drive to expand and destroy its own external conditions generates intensifying crises and conflicts that open the way for socialist transformation. So, bit of a prophecy of doom from reading Rosa Luxemburg. The message I get is that it can only get worse before it gets better. Or I think it was in The Dark Knight, the darkest night's darkest period is before the dawn. So, well, even in dark times there's hope. But the way we get a socialist transformation, or any transformation, is the subject of our next work, or at least the next work that I'm going to be looking at today, Reform or Revolution. So she wrote Reform or Revolution in the year 1900, and she argued that gradual reforms within capitalism cannot lead to socialism, in contrast to Edvard Bernstein's revisionism. So Bernstein believed in evolutionary socialism via parliamentary means, the i.e., gradual social democracy. But the book reaffirms Marxism's revolutionary core amid social democratic debates. So she warns that reformism integrates socialists into capitalism, delaying true transformation. Tony Blair, anyone? Keir Starmer, anyone? So Luxemburg contends that reforms improve workers' conditions temporarily, but they preserve capitalism's exploitative structure, including wage labour, private ownership. So she insists socialism demands a proletarian revolution to overthrow the capitalist state, not mere modifications. Well, I mean, we're lucky these days to even get modifications. So, while she rejects reformism as an end goal, she views daily reform struggles as essential means to engage class war and build proletarian power and advance toward revolution. Reforms are trials of freedom that mobilise the masses without substituting for systemic change. So, to sum up, Rosa Luxemburg was certainly a revolutionary. She believed that reformism and social democracy were a half measure at best, and well, we see that. I mean, we see that now. Why do we keep getting? Why is all the talk about identity politics rather than actual systemic change that would really benefit people more than, say, these open-ended and quite acrimonious culture wars? Indeed, it's my own personal opinion that the cultural wars are a method of control, but that's for another debate. However, Rosa Luxemburg is essential because, number one, she advocated mass strikes and other forms of insurrection for revolutionary change, not reformism or gradual systemic change, which she believed to be a dead end, and I'm sure she probably feels vindicated now. Um, at the same time, I would say the accumulation of capital is a very essential counterpart to Lenin's imperialism is the highest form of capitalism, because it shows that imperialism is just a natural outgrowth of capitalism. Well, the only people that really were open about this was Mussolini. Mussolini famously stated that expansionism is the natural end result of national unification and development. So only really Mussolini, or perhaps that other guy with the stubby moustache and the crooked cross were open about it. Other people just dress it up in language like humanitarian intervention, freeing the people from tyranny and dictatorship, that kind of thing. But we do see an ongoing repeat of history. The Uniparty, the Forever Wars. So, on that note, I think Rosa Luxemburg deserves more attention because she actually offers solutions rather than just the piecemeal approach, or even the illusion of change. Look at Rosa Luxemburg if you believe in real change. Thank you all.